Good morning, and welcome to this session. I'm not going to introduce this man here. Most of you know who he is, but there's a clip coming up, and I think, by your fruit you shall be known, Fred. Oh, I gave it away. Could we roll the clip, which I think says everything?
Something magical and different and wild about this place.
It is said that the longest journey begins with a single step.
She's getting excited, look.
Hi there, how are you?
That's why she's listening to you.
I know she is.
Oh, she's touching the camera now.
Wow, look at that, a gift.
Remember me?
Look at them! Isn't it wonderful?
It's the last minutes that they're going to be in a cage for the rest of their lives.
The exciting part of this story is yet to come.
Well, I think if you're not profoundly moved by that, there's something wrong with you, and you'll have to come and see me on my couch afterwards. So we're here to talk to Fred Kaufman, and apparently...
By the way, Harry, you just go right to Q&A after that, and
Yes?
just jump right to it. And
Cut to the chase. You know, it's been quite difficult with Fred, because ever since he has arrived, he's rearranged everything. We've had more couches in and out. He's rejected 2 couches. Once a producer, always a producer. So I love that scene, by the way, with the monkey grabbing the little baby as it's trying to make off. So, Fred, I'll catch you if you try and leave. I am told the executive producer of PBS's most watched documentary series, Fred Kaufman, has helped to expose millions of people worldwide to the wonders of the natural world. It's all timing, isn't it, Fred? He's helped nature garner 700 honors from around the globe, including 12 Emmys and 3 Peabodys. And I'm here to get under his skin, which makes me sound a little like Hannibal Lecter. We'll try and make it as painless as possible. But in his own right, Fred has also garnered some extraordinary awards. The Outstanding Achievement Award at Wildscreen here, the Grand Teton Award at Jackson Hole, and the WWF Lifetime Achievement Award at Missoula, a hat trick. But I think Fred, who is a remarkably modest man, would be the first to say that none of this would be possible without the fantastic team that he has, led by the Duchess and the Consigliere, who are here, Janet Hess and William Murphy. And I've had the pleasure of working with them all, as I know many of you in this room have too. And it's always been a pleasure. But I think we better sort of deal with a few of the myths that have grown up around Fred. I mean, you can't sit on the furry throne for nearly 25 years, is it, Fred? And not acquire a bit of a sort of mythology and a mystique around you. So can you begin at the beginning? Is it true that you were raised by wolves, that you helped release from the local Bronx Zoo where you lived as a child?
yeah, well, I am from the Bronx, so being raised by wolves is not very far off. But it's over 25 years. And by the way, it's great to be here, and thank you for inviting me. What you saw is what we call a hush reel. We usually play that at the beginning of big dinners or presentations to get everybody's attention and start the event. And it's always a little awkward in a room like this because most of you are responsible for what you see up there, so you know what went on, and I'm sort of taking credit for it. But
well, that's your job, really, isn't it?
It is. But anyway, great to be with you, and whatever awards and whatever accolades we get is really because of the work you all do for nature. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, I think one of the most remarkable things, Fred, is how you, notwithstanding my little joke about you orchestrating the set here, one of the things that you take very seriously is allowing people to get on and do their best work. And nature has been that place for 25 years under your rule. Is it difficult? Do you feel tantalized?
Well, I actually know very little about natural history, as you know, Harry. And so many people in the audience know I didn't study it. I didn't really make a natural history film. I'm frankly not terribly interested in it. I find most of the films kind of slow. Even the ones we do, we're not excluded.
Yeah.
So I came at it from a very different perspective. I started on nature, as a young boy, thinking I'd graduate to something better. That never happened.
You wanted to be a sports
Well, initially I wanted
commentator.
to, what I really wanted to do was direct, but yeah, I got the nature job, but all the time I was hoping to get a job in sports. And I stayed with it, and it was, in those early days, it was really, really tough for me because I would go and meet with the BBC, and my God, what they must have thought of this young kid who could barely tell the difference between a leopard and a cheetah.
Is there a difference?
And
I think
here I was commenting on their film. So very early on, I sort of took the persona of, listen, I'm not going to sort of argue and debate and come at them from an educational.
Oh.
Hello? Hello?
Test? Do you hear this?
Could you hear? Should we start all over?
Oh my God! All the brilliance that preceded this was not heard.
Yeah.
I think we need to start from the top.
Could you hear in the rear row? You
Okay.
could. Fred, your natural projection.
Okay.
Yeah, you're a natural.
Anyway, so talking with the BBC in some of those early years, I quickly discovered there's no way I can chat with them.
Could you identify that? I think that's the mating call.
I think that's a liar bird. I think I...
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway, so basically I could really not compete or I was not nearly on the level of trying to talk to them scientifically about behavior, but what I did know was what I felt about looking at a film and how that made me feel. And I could tell very quickly whether something was working or not, whether it was paced right, whether there was story structure, all those things that sort of came easy to me, I was able to discuss. And so from my point of view, that's how I sort of entered the business. I sort of gave up on the idea of talking to anybody intelligently about animal behavior, but really approach it in terms of the craft of making a film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a form of liberation. I mean, no one really appreciates someone messing too deeply with the intricacies of their film, but they want someone who can tell a bigger story to make sure that it's a popular event, because you're very mindful, aren't you, that it's important that people actually watch our programs, which is quite a revolutionary idea sometimes.
Well, it's funny, in this industry of ours, we rarely, if ever, talk about audience. We never really talk about the user of what it is we're creating. And I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've never had a producer say to me, here's where I want to take the audience, and then I'm going to kind of make a real sharp left, and they're expecting a right, and that's going to further engross them. That kind of language is never really spoken. And as far as telling a story and crafting a story, I think we're really bad at that.
Yeah. So you're, the perfect complement. Fantastic ignorance matched to geekiness.
Or somewhere in the middle, I think. But yes, it's really about, I think the images you all get are extraordinary. And for the most part, when you come to a place like Wildscreen, everybody has their laptop, and the first thing they want to do is show you what they have. And if you have an incredibly compelling 45 seconds, chances are you're going to get a film out of it. Somebody will go, make me a film, just get me another 49 minutes, and we're all set. But in terms of crafting a story that has an impact on the audience and creates buzz and helps sell DVDs and has people compelled to want to watch again, we're not good at that.
Right. Storytelling, that's the sweet spot. And we've got a couple of clips which I asked you to choose, and I think that they're wonderful at expressing the full range of Fred's very omnivorous taste. One is about a tiger, which of course is a bit of a no-brainer, the obvious animal for any iconic natural history film. But the other is a turkey, and let's roll the clips because I think that they give the full spectrum.
Now, I'm mindful of the audience, so I know most of you know these two films, so I didn't just want to take random pieces from each film and demonstrate story. What I did was I took the very beginning of each film. I mean, the first thing you see in Broken Tail, Colin's telling that story, that's the first thing. And in Turkey, where our character is walking toward us and the young turkeys come out from the grass, and he says, this is my life as a turkey. Because to me, in each case, you're compelled to see what happens. You simply cannot turn away. And particularly in Turkey, that Dave Allen did, that very first scene that goes on for maybe 30 seconds is enough to engage you for the entire hour. You just have to watch what had happened and why we got to this point. So in both those cases, I think the very first scene you see is enough to grip you to go on. But, there are films that are complete story arcs like the two you see here. Not every film is intended to be that. I mean, we do a lot of, and probably our most popular films are the sort of catalog films where you'll look at owls, for example, and you'll try to showcase 8 or 9 different owls. But sometimes within those sequences, there are stories, smaller stories, that sort of hop, skip, and jump you along the telling of a bigger picture. Fantastic.
The ability to find these storytellers. Colin obviously has kissed the Blarney Stone. I was really struck, it reminded me of the scene with Kevin Spacey describing Kaiser Sose in The Usual Suspects. I mean, it was wonderful storytelling, how he turned and the tiger had gone. And Joe Hutto is just a fantastic writer. How do you find these people?
Well, I don't, but some very wonderful, talented producers do. And it's tough. I mean, it's very hard to find somebody who can engage you when the camera's on. It's that special quality that we all look for. It's impossible to describe. You can't just put an ad, a classified ad, and try to get people to come in. In Joe's case, what makes him special, Joe is a scientist. I mean, he's there with his deer cap and his overalls, and you wouldn't expect it. And he wrote a book on his experience. So by the time he was sitting in front of the camera, this had his whole presentation, his experience has been thought about. He wrote about it. He talked about it. It's been honed and practiced and really sculpted. So, he wasn't really searching for anything. He's lived this life, and he was able to communicate it really well. And, Colin is just terrific at it. Listen, it's a really tough quality, and but when you find people who can tell their own story, it's incredibly valuable, because both those guys in the films, they're basically the stars of the films.
Mm. Is there a theme that you look for in your storytelling? Prior to doing this talk with you, I looked at a lot of the nature shows, and it seemed that there was something in common with them all. And that's this sort of moment where people cross a line and engage with animals, that there's this sort of intra-species moment. And in your showreel, you have this fantastic kind of Michelangelo moment where the guy touches the orangutan's finger. It's like the Sistine Chapel. And then you have that moment where Cynthia Moss interacts with the elephant, and then that scary moment where that chimpanzee hugs the lady, Linda Kerpner. Scary, because I went to that research center where those chimps had been, and they were very angry chimps. And that moment where the chimp hugs her is profound.
Why don't you tell everybody what you told me when you showed up there?
Well, it's an amazing facility. It's a series of islands in Florida where chimps, which have been taken from research facilities, from zoos, celebrity owners who've got bored of their bubbles. There must be about 200 or 300 chimps there, the biggest collection of chimps. They're on these islands, and because chimps are sort of pure muscle, they can't swim, and all that separates you from them is the water. And they are very angry chimps, some of them. So the only thing they can do is throw shit at you, which they store up and wait for someone like me to come around. And then you walk around, and they are remarkably accurate. And who can blame them?
Well, I think my personal opinion has always, my feelings have always been that I'm really less interested in the science of natural history and far more interested in sort of the emotional stories. And I think that's what stays with you. Mm-hmm. And I think for the audience, that's really what they crave. I mean, at least the American audience really want to feel that animals are like us, that they think like us and they feel like us, and they have emotions and they grieve and they love and they care for their young. And sometimes if we can show that, it's sort of an everlasting feeling of worth and pride and all the things we love about the natural world. It's really a feeling that lingers. And I think with our audience, they actually want more of it. I mean, I think, and particularly on social media, it's what gets the biggest buzz. It's what goes viral. And again, for us, we have a series on PBS. We're like a little boutique, as opposed to cable, which is programming 24/7. So everything we do sort of has to be special, handcrafted. You're not going to see it anywhere else. It's going to be different, and it's going to be kind of very individual. And I think in emotional stories, they're very personal, individual stories that stay with you. And to ask the public television audience to give us money, which is what we do, the easiest way to do that is to press those buttons.
Right. Now, telling stories, the flip side of telling stories is telling porky pies, telling too much of a story. There's a fine line between finding the most effective way of communicating and maintaining authenticity. And you described some of these programs that appeared, I think there was a sort of spate of fake shows, let's call them, last year, the year before. They seem to have gone away, but you said it was like a train crash. What did you mean by that?
Well, I was talking specifically about Eaten Alive, the Discovery show, which really started a change at Discovery. but I mean, it was clearly intended to get as many eyeballs as possible to watch that show. I mean, it was so sensational. And so it was a train wreck. You sort of looked and wanted to see, and then once you saw, you moved on to what it is you would normally watch or be interested in seeing. You know, for us, it's great because it further distinguishes what we do. But and I don't know where I'm going with this. I mean, other than how far some producers would go. Oh, I know where I wanted to take this. We rely on a steady, loyal, weekly audience. That's sort of our strategy. We don't have we have no advertising budget. So, you know, we have to sort of deliver each week on a promise that what you're going to see is worthy of your time and worthy of public money, as opposed to saying, hey, we got this sensational idea, we'll put it in during sweeps, the ratings will spike, it'll average out into a high number, which will increase the ad dollars.
Yeah.
That's not what we do, and I don't know that I would argue with that other strategy, it's just not what we do.
Okay. But, you know, if I was an extraterrestrial and I'd crash-landed into your archive and I spent the weekend looking at your shows. Now, we were looking at My Life as a Turkey, but also there's the Touching the Wild show. And in both of those, you have to rehabituate mule deer and turkey chicks. And you get an actor in who plays the part of Hutto, and you film sequences where you're pretending that these are skittish mule deer, when in fact, you know, they're completely habituated. So what's the difference between that and a fake snake trying to eat someone?
Well, it wasn't a fake snake.
Wasn't it? I thought it was a fake snake.
Fake as in?
No, I know it wasn't.
No.
Yeah. But he was in Kevlar. I mean.
Well, you know, interesting about the turkey film, when Dave talked to us about it, and I had no idea it would turn out as wonderful as it did. I had two very big concerns, and I said to him, you know, do you have all the permits necessary to do this? You know, I mean, with Fish and Wildlife, and you're going to get these eggs, and you're going to imprint, and you know, are we okay? Do we feel like we needed to talk to everybody we could to make sure we're on solid ground with this? And he said yes. And then I said, well, what happens if those turkey chicks die? And he said, well, then we don't have a film. And he didn't miss a beat. And anybody else would have kind of spun me a story about, well, we'll turn it into a bighorn sheep film, and you know, we'll do this. And I was really appreciative of his honesty. And you know, Dave has such confidence that, well, it was worth the effort. I mean, it's the kind of thing, of course, we're going to try and do this. But as long as I felt ethically that we were doing everything we needed to do, and we were retelling this story, and we knew what would happen at the end with, you know, ultimately these imprinted chicks leaving, that I felt fine with it. You know, I don't have the quick, you know, 3-sentence, you know, we know it when we see it. We know who we're working with. We know what feels right. We know when it doesn't feel right, and we ask the right questions and do it accordingly. Now, why don't we show the mule deer clip in a brief?
Yeah, so the mule deer clip is it the first or the second one? Hold on 1 second. Yeah, it's the first one. So can we show 4, but not show the second clip, just one clip?
All my life, I've been compelled to try to make contact with wild creatures. I'm trained as a scientist, but what I really study is hard to quantify because I just don't observe a species. I try to get close enough to get to know the characters of individual wild animals. I've lived alongside all kinds of creatures, but one chance encounter with a mule deer was the instigation for a study that would take over 7 years of my life. I was out in the sagebrush and I met this young buck, and he had such a peculiar interest in me.
Oh boy. Who are you?
Somehow I made a gesture. Maybe I spoke to him. Maybe I said, "Hey buddy, what's happening?" We stared, and he clearly understood that I was not a threat. I would encounter that same deer, and that deer would go, "Oh, it's that guy." He returned an upward nod of the head. And I looked away, and I nodded my head, and he returned the gesture again. That deer was willing to see me as an individual, and he very clearly saw that I granted him his individuality. I was not seeing something, I was seeing someone. I never saw that lone buck again, but it was in that moment that I realized just what potential there was in these animals.
You know, the tricky thing about making this film, all those deer were habituated. So they would just naturally come up to Joe, and the story we had to tell, and what we were very clear about, we were telling the backstory, was to make it look like they weren't habituated, that it was this very slow process. And so it took quite a bit of crafting to get those shots, so it didn't reveal too much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Touching the Wild and My Life as a Turkey were both absolutely gorgeous films, which walked away with a wheelbarrow load of awards each. And you make the point very well that, you know, that's just that's legitimate, whereas a fake snake, you know, is just a cheap it's just a cheap trick.
Is this from one of your films?
Yep. This was the snake used in Eaten Alive. This is it. It wasn't real. No, I was just joking. My final question then, Fred, is would you ever commission anything based on a really wonderful, rare piece of footage that you'd never seen before? Or would there have to be, you know, given that you've said that you don't come from a scientific background, is it all about the story or is a bit of rare behavior? Would that do it for you?
Well, it's you know, it's the typical answer is let me see what it is.
Oh, well, let me show it to you then. Could we have the final clip? Not the next clip, the final clip. This is something we managed to capture, and I'm hoping it will excite you and that I can look forward to a commission.
Because they prefer the weeds of the plain, the jockeys spend long periods in the open, risking attack from hunters, like the artist formerly known as Prince. After feasting greedily on the carcass, the artist will sleep. It will be 2 days before he hunts again.
Well, I'll give you one of my favorite answers. We've done it before.
Well, Well, there's very little that Fred Kaufman hasn't done before in 25 wonderful years running a company that has really set a standard for us all to follow. So thank you very much, Fred. Thank you.